Rick Westhead has been one of the leading voices reporting on repeated allegations of abuse within the world of hockey. Last month, Westhead sat down with the Investigative Journalism Bureau's Robert Cribb to discuss his new book, We Breed Lions. The book details a string of proven and alleged sexual assaults, abuse, and hazing within Canadian junior hockey, and the systemic issues that allow such behavior to persist. As a special bonus 10-3 episode, we present to you that conversation in full.
Senior correspondent for TSN, contributor to CTV National News and W5. He has won 6 Canadian Screen Awards for his original features, and in 2025 was recognized for his, quote, fearless reporting by the Hockey News and its list of 100 people of power and influence in hockey. Prior to joining TSN, he served as a contributor to the New York Times and was foreign affairs writer for the Toronto Star, where he also covered sports business. And what's not written here, but what I can report to you credibly, is he's also a lovely, lovely guy. And we're really lucky to have him here tonight. He was selfless. The minute I asked him, it took him 2 seconds to say yes. So please welcome Rick Westhead. So we'll focus on the book tonight, not exclusively, but we'll obviously focus on the book, which is a bestseller in Canada. Congratulations on that. It's had extraordinary resonance, I think, and power in the public discussion. But it's a tough book. It's a tough book. I've now read it twice through in preparation for this. It is dark. There's passages where you have to stop and put it down for a while. It's a relentless book, I would say, in terms of the revelations that flow one after the other. It feels like machine gun fire at times. I knew you to be a guy who loves hockey. Rick and I played in the same morning skate for many, many years together. He's coached his son. You drone on endlessly about who should be playing center for the Leafs. You follow the game, you love the game. But when you write a book like this, inevitably, there are many who will say, you're the bad guy. You're trying to tear down this game. You're trying to rewrite the classic Canadian narrative around hockey, the Tim Hortons commercials, the early mornings, driving to the rink and back, the magic that is in the game that you love. How do you respond to that?
Well, first, thank you to everyone for coming tonight. It's cold, and it takes real intent to get on the subway or drive downtown Toronto, even on the best of days. So thank you for everyone coming. I know, like you do, when you do investigative reporting, that people that you are reporting on are not going to be happy sometimes. These are uncomfortable truths. And the bargain that we strike when we do the work is that we know that this is going to happen, right? It's not like this is a new phenomenon. One of the comparisons I draw in the book too is the Catholic Church. Yeah. And in 2001, the Boston Globe came out with a number of amazing stories, amazing in terms of the reporting behind them, about how the church in the city of Boston was taking priests who'd been accused of hurting children and moving them to new parishes where they often reoffended again. And when the Globe published this reporting, the response from the church was immediate. There was threats of litigation against the newspaper. There was pushback even within the Globe itself to the reporters who were doing this reporting. There was calling on the reporters to focus on all of the good that the church did. Why do you have to focus on the negatives, right? Yeah. One of the prominent bishops on the East Coast of the United States actually called for the wrath of God to come down on these reporters who did this important work that was, for people who may have seen it, was used to inspire the movie in 2026 Spotlight, which won the Academy Award for the Best Picture. So it just goes with the territory, you know. I know in my heart that what I'm doing is right. I know that it is leading to conversations that are making children safer in Canada. And if that means that the cost of that is that People in hockey might not like me. I think in the foreword, Stephen Brunt wrote that Kevin Lowe, a member of the Hockey Hall of Fame, wondered if I was writing this book out of spite because maybe I was cut from hockey teams when I was a child. I mean, read the room, look at all the cases. Even since we first learned of this case, even since we learned of this case in London, Ontario, just go down the roll of all the different stories there have been. 2 players in the Quebec Major Junior League, Nicolas Daigle and Massimo Siciliano, who pleaded guilty last year to sexual assault on the eve of their trial. 3 other players, including Shane Corson's son Noah, who are guilty of sexual assault involving a teenage girl in Quebec. Peel Police is currently investigating a claim by a woman that she was sexually assaulted by 8 junior hockey players in 2014 in Mississauga. Ryan Kessler, former NHL star, is charged in Michigan with sexually assaulting the friend of his teenage daughter. Willie Mitchell is accused in a civil lawsuit in British Columbia of sexual assault. Artemi Panarin, a star with the New York Rangers, allegedly sexually assaulted a woman who worked for the Rangers organization, and that team allegedly paid off a settlement to make that case go away. We haven't even talked about all the myriad cases in minor hockey that I'm alerted to every week. There is clearly a problem here. And just to finish my thought, 2 things can be true. We can have a game that is amazing, and I think hockey is the best game in the world, but it can also be true that a sport can have systemic issues. And every moment that I doubt myself on this, and there are moments when I do, I think, boy, like, this is hard reporting. I think of what my friend Sheldon Kennedy tells me. One of the blessings of this reporting has been becoming a friend of Sheldon, who is a Canadian hero, right? For coming out. For those who don't know, Sheldon Kennedy was raped hundreds of times by his coach in junior in the 1990s and came forward to the police, which led to Graham James, his former coach, being convicted. And every time I talk to Sheldon Kennedy, he tells me, even this week, it's the tip of the iceberg. Keep going. You're on the right side of history. These are systemic problems that must be confronted if we're going to make this sport and other sports in Canada better and safer.
Any pushback in terms of, you mentioned litigation, you name a lot of names in the book, and a lot of these guys are on the record, like with their names, which is one of the extraordinary things about it, because it's tough. I know in this subject matter in particular, it's very difficult to get people to go on the record. And the credibility that comes with that is extraordinary, and you were able to do it a lot. Has there been any pushback in terms of threats of litigation?
No.
No.
And, when we do this work, being sued is a possibility, right? I've been sued a few times, never lost a lawsuit, right? But that is the territory, right? In one case, just if anyone is wondering, we did a documentary for TSN about the culture of gymnastics. And a coach who was featured in the documentary sued us for defamation and alleged that the main allegation in his case was that we had not given him an opportunity to comment. And so as it happens, the Calgary Herald did a story on that allegation, and Rick Westhead allegedly did not give this coach a chance to comment.
I remember this, yeah.
Well, in the statement of defense that we filed, we pointed out the dozen different ways we had given him an opportunity to comment. The different emails, right? The registered letter we'd sent, the different text messages that he had received and read on his phone. We went out of our way to make sure that he had a chance to comment. But, sometimes, and you'd also know this, sometimes people will file a lawsuit just so that they can say in their community, I filed a lawsuit. And then there are many times that it doesn't go anywhere. But still, it can be scary to be sued. And when you wonder, well, why aren't more reporters going down this road? I wonder how many young journalists have the support of their organizations to do this, knowing that there's the possibility that you could be sued for any of these things.
The book doesn't target the NHL, but obviously it's inevitably part of this. And you have a somewhat rocky history reporting on the NHL and Gary Bettman. Any response at all from Bettman or the NHL?
No, and I wouldn't expect there to be. This book is really like the genesis, the origin story of this book is when I heard about these allegations in London, Ontario, right? I'd heard about the allegation in this lawsuit that, there was close to a dozen men, young men, in a hotel room for hours with a naked young woman who alleged that she'd been sexually assaulted. And of course, by now, most Canadians, if not all Canadians, know that that case went to trial for 2 months and wound up with an acquittal. And not only that, the judge in the case said that she had found actual consent. Nevertheless, if it was either of my sons who was in that room and stayed there, I would be deeply ashamed of them because it's not how I've raised them. And when I read about these allegations for the first time, I wondered, how did we get here? How did we get to a point where, you could have this many men in a room with a young woman like that, and no one is saying, are we okay with, what's happening right now? No one said to EM, by their own testimony, no one has ever said that they checked in and asked, are you okay? Is everything okay right now? And so that's the question that I wanted to answer, is how we got here. And so I used Instagram and messaged about 200 or so players who'd been drafted into the Canadian Hockey League, which is the highest level of junior hockey in our country. And from that outreach, I interviewed 58 players, young men in their 20s, whose stories were contemporary. And the through line of all of these stories was they love hockey, but every one of them acknowledged the issues that have to be faced and changed in terms of off-ice issues.
Let's just talk, I want to dive into the book, but before we do, the process of writing it, it's intense. It's a very intense series of chapters which detail, in some cases, with tremendous forensic precision, these cases. Talk about what it's like to spend months doing 58 interviews, which means 58 transcripts, which means going back through these conversations to pluck out the highlights and the quotes. That's an immersive process, which I know a lot about. And after an extended period of time, there's a cumulative effect often. What was your worst day writing this book?
I don't know that I had a worst day. I mean, everything in life is about context and relativity, right? And I do write in this book about, the trials my family went through when our son Carter was diagnosed with cancer. And so those months that we spent at Sick Kids Hospital, those were hard days, right? Writing this, you mentioned 58 interviews. It was actually far more than that because each one of these players, I'd want to go back and ask them more. Right. So you do an interview with them and then follow up. I remember one of the players quoted in here is a former Ottawa 67s player named Ben Fanjoy. Yeah. I think I did 6 interviews with him. Right. And I tried to get to his family members. I tried to, Dan Carcillo was another player, and I interviewed his mother, and I was asking, can I talk to your wife? Can I talk to other people in your life, right? Just to corroborate facts, to try to get more, a little bit more zest in terms of what you can add to the storytelling. And also, when you interview somebody about something that they haven't thought about for so many years, and then you come back and interview them again a week or so later, all the time, that second interview, someone will say, oh, I've been thinking about it, and this has come to mind that I didn't remember when we spoke about it first. And in cases like I'm reporting in this book, it's understandable why they wouldn't remember it because so many of these men have suppressed these memories, right? Because they've been hurt in some way, in some cases, in life-changing ways from experiences in junior hockey.
So you sent out these emails saying, I'm Rick Westhead and I'm writing a book and I'd like to talk to you. Why do you think so many said, yes, I would like to engage with you to talk about these things?
Well, I think just as surprising as the fact that they talked to me at all was the fact that, like you pointed out, that so many of them said, put my name on this. right? And that was startling.
Yeah.
And, can I read a section to
please.
back up my...
Yeah.
So I haven't actually done any readings on this in the months since this has been out, but just to highlight what these men are talking about, one of the players I interviewed a number of times is a former NHL player named Curtis Gabriel. And Curtis Gabriel grew up in Newmarket and was raised by his mom after his dad's death by suicide when he was 10. He tried out for a junior C team, and a scout saw him and offered him a tryout, and the next thing you know, he was playing in the Ontario Hockey League. And I'll just read a couple paragraphs here. Sex was something our team talked about every day, Gabriel told me. It was all about who could get a girl to do something crazy sexually. These conversations weren't a secret. At the end of our team practice, if you paid attention, you'd see guys banging their sticks, and all of a sudden someone had to do a lap. It's because the guy shared a story about sex. Gabriel said he and his teammates came to view young women as trophies. I cannot stress how much we were talking about sex, he said. It was for status. It was, look how much I can get. Look how masculine and dominant I am. Instead of talking about the NBA or other sports, we talked every day about sex and about trying to get girls to send us nude photos or take part in threesomes. These were casual conversations we had. He goes on to talk about losing his virginity only because he was pressured by other players to have sex before he was ready to. He says, he says that he remembered being called to the back of the bus by veteran players and being told to share the story about how he'd lost his virginity. I was young, Gabriel said. I'd kissed one girl, that was it. But there was so much pressure, so I just made a story up, because if they had a sense you were a virgin, it meant ridicule and embarrassment. Days after Gabriel told his story, his teammates discovered he'd lied about it. He said that to avoid further harassment, he arranged to have sex with a young woman. I was like, fuck it. I'm going to just sleep with someone to get it over with, he said. I had to do it. I needed to reclaim my masculinity and my standing on the team. I was home for Christmas. I had a pretty good idea who to call. It was a 19-year-old girl who lived in another OHL city and followed me on Instagram. I just told her I needed this to happen, that I didn't want anything more from her than the sex, and she agreed. Anyways, Curtis goes on to share other stories about this. And what strikes me about that is the message that OHL and junior teams give to parents when they draft their sons and they move away from home to live with billet families. And that message is, we're a family and we will watch over your son as if he was our own. You cannot tell me that these conversations on these buses are happening without the knowledge, the full knowledge of coaches. And what a betrayal that is. And so, of course, we have to report on this. Mm-hmm. Since the book came out, every day, someone new messages me. Yesterday, it was somebody who was a billet parent in North Bay. A couple days before that, it was a young woman who wanted to share experiences she'd had with hockey. On the weekend, a former NHL player whose son had gone through an issue with his teammates in junior. And one player agent, his name's Rich Winter, based in Edmonton, talked to me about how many former players that he's talked to about issues like this, men who, because they've been so desensitized to sex, because of stories like this, have wound up in marriages with serious intimacy problems, with impotence problems, that they trace back to their experiences in junior hockey.
So lifelong implications. There's other examples of that I want to get into. But let's start at the beginning, at the genesis story for the book and for much of your work. I'm always fascinated by the question of how'd you get it? So Rick, as you probably know, broke the story on the lawsuit, the EM lawsuit that led to the charges against the 5 NHL players that ultimately gripped the nation and had us all spellbound. So how do you get it? So, and you start here. You start the book this way. So you're in Europe. You're in Serbia. You're reporting. You're shooting a documentary for TSN. You're busy. Your phone is ringing, an unknown number several times. You don't answer. You're busy. Eventually, you pick up, and there's a voice at the other end of the phone, and that person says, you need to get to the courthouse in London, Ontario, and pull the documents in a new lawsuit that's been filed against Hockey Canada, the source told me. They spoke rapidly and quietly, their voice barely above a whisper. Quote, this will change hockey. It may change our country. Our conversation lasted less than a minute. It took several days while I was still in Serbia before I finally connected with someone at the London courthouse who, after I paid the required $10 fee, agreed to email me a copy of the court record the tipster had mentioned. The 33-page document outlined an allegation of sexual assault, EM versus Hockey Canada, Canadian Hockey League, and 8 John Doe hockey players that would leave Canadians shaken. So that's a good day when you get a tip like that. There's a million tips, but that's a remarkable tip.
Yeah, I remember emailing my colleagues at TSN and saying, you know, brace yourself when you read this court document that I'm about to send to you. And then I remember it being a very nerve-wracking week because, you know, being a there was a time not too long ago when reporters would have a big story and we'd run it on the front page of a paper on the weekend, and we'd call someone for a comment and give them a chance to comment at 6 p.m. on a Friday night.
Yeah.
Hardly fair. And so in this case, I remember, you know, emailing the, and our lawyer was brought into, Peter Jacobson was brought into it right away. And we talked about, okay, what's our game plan to report on this? So we had to try to reach the Canadian Hockey League. We needed to reach Hockey Canada, of course. We tried to figure out who the John Doe players were. We tried to get to EM or alternatively EM's lawyer to see if they wanted to comment. And all this takes time. Yeah. The Canadian Hockey League says, we'll get back to you and, you know, when we get back to you.
When we get back to you, yeah.
And so every day you get up and you wonder, well, is someone else going to break the story today? But again, I think it's important, and opportunities like this to talk about how we do what we do is so crucial to talk to the public, because the public, in my opinion, do not care who has the story first. No one cares. You know, whether it's a trade that we're all scrambling over to try to break on Twitter, or whether it's important reporting about a sexual assault case like this, Canadians don't care whether TSN has it first, or the National Post has it first, or the Globe, or the Star, or anyone. What the public cares about is that we're responsible and that we get our facts right. Yeah. And so in a case like this, you know, there was a chance that holding off could get us scooped. And in fact, that actually happened not long after this. There was a point when, as Canada was blowing up with this story and there was parliamentary hearings, I got another tip that Hockey Canada had for years been maintaining a secret slush fund. You know, a fund that was built with minor hockey registrations from Canadians across the country, and that fund was being used to quietly make these cases go away. And I was working on another story about another alleged sexual assault involving members of Canada's 2003 World Juniors team in Halifax, and I was focused on that. And in the time it took me to come back to the slush fund story, the Globe and Mail had broken it open on the front page. Grant Robertson, that's amazing reporting.
Yeah. You've never talked about who this person is who called you. Are you at liberty to do so now?
No. So that's the bargain, right? If the minute that we start playing cute and give hints or talk about this at all, why would anyone ever trust us again? The commitment that we make to protect a source's identity is a serious one. So I would never betray that.
So this is your deep throat that you go to your deathbed with.
I mean, sure.
All right, let's get into the guts of the book. So how did we get here? You do a long section on how it is that we've arrived at the place where we have arrived. And it's fascinating. You give sort of a constellation of factors, and I just want to go through some of them. The first is just flat out this kind of gladiator culture that you just talked about, that you just read. I'm going to read another section. This is a different player. And I thought this sort of captured the essence of that insular, closed environment. It is ingrained in us that our teammates are our brothers. We are expected to have each other's back, to lie for each other if we have to. Civilians wouldn't understand it. When we look around the room, we are 20 clones of ourselves, and we all know we are better than everyone else. This is our culture. We breed lions, and how do you tell a lion to stop being a lion? I don't know where you found these articulate guys. Like, that's an incredibly powerful quote, and ultimately became the title of your book.
Random House actually fought me on that at first.
Why?
They didn't like the title, We
Why?
Breed Lions.
Why?
I don't know. They were thinking like, more cliche. We tossed around more cliched ideas like 5 in a game. We knew that there was 5 players that were ultimately charged in London. 5 in a game is this colloquial hockey term for a 5-minute major in a game misconduct. But I remember saying, no, like this is it, because that quote is just so powerful.
It's the best quote in the book, I think. Characterize for me that sentiment, which is actually woven throughout the book. This isn't a unique sentiment. It's very much reflected throughout the book. But this is a particularly poignant, I think, expression of it. How do you read it? How do you read this description of an environment?
Well, first, I don't think it's the best quote in the book. I know what the best quote in the book is.
What's the best
make that your last question to me tonight. I will tell you what the best quote is with my last answer.
Hold me to it.
What do I take away from that? I just think that just encapsulates everything that we're talking about. What is it to take a boy who is 16 or 17 and say, you are now going to play, you're from Toronto, you're now going to live in Sault Ste. Marie, right? Or further away from home. And in many cases, these boys aren't shaving yet, right? Sheldon told me that when he played his first year of junior, he had never shaved before, and there were players on his team that were balding already. The difference between a 16-year-old, and in Western Hockey League, you can play as a 15-year-old, even younger. So you're a 15 playing with a 21-year-old. Very different maturity levels, right? And the pressure that these players feel to be accepted and to fit in, you almost cannot describe how important it is to be one of the guys, to do whatever it takes to fit in. If your teammates are on the bus and say, you're going to start a Tinder account and let us take it over because we want to meet young girls. If their older teammates say, we've got a rookie party, you're 16, your job is to bring 3 girls to the party this weekend, you will do that. Because if you don't, and you don't fit in and you're not one of the guys, you feel like you're on another planet and you're by yourself, right? Your family is far away from you. I'm amazed, frankly, that we haven't had this conversation before, right? Hockey, yeah, all these things that you said are true. The Tim Hortons commercials, wrapping ourselves in the flag. It's amazing to watch Canada do well on a world stage in hockey, but there have been thousands of men who have come through this system. And when you talk about the things that they have had to endure, we're talking about things that have affected their partners, the way that they've fathered, right? The way that they are connecting with other people and treating other people. These are serious things.
Let's talk about coaches and parents. They get a rough ride in here. And intimately connected to the culture is this notion that this culture can only exist with the permission of those who are responsible, with coaches and parents. I love this quote. Larissa Mills, a cognitive behavioral coach who works with young players. So she's up close, sees it, and has unique lens and expertise on it. She says, we're creating egotistical adults with no boundaries or social etiquette or understanding of consequences. The kids don't fear anyone. They don't fear their coaches or their parents. I'm worried about our young children's development today. Coaches don't discipline, parents don't discipline, and we wind up making excuses for so many kids who have this cocky bravado, who hurt people around them. I mean, it's a sobering quote from an expert who very much lays the blame at the feet of adults. And to be clear, we don't want to demonize the parents and the coaches, because obviously the investment that they're making in the game and the kids is extraordinary. But it does feel like there is something that has gone askew in the way that there seems to be a permission for this. The very example that you gave earlier about these conversations on the bus, there's adults on the bus. Do we behave as adults who are in positions of responsibility, do we behave differently when it's hockey than anything else?
I think maybe. I mean, hockey is unique in that it is the only sport where we are sending away, where boys who are as young as 15 are leaving their family homes to play against 20, 21-year-old men, with and against. So it is unique in that sense. These issues are everywhere in society, right? In Hollywood, Jeffrey Epstein. You can go down the list, right? Larry Nassar in gymnastics, Jerry Sandusky at Michigan State, Harvey Weinstein, the Hollywood producer, right? It's not as if hockey has this monopoly on bad behavior. However, because of its place in Canadian society, why wouldn't we look at this and, really try to affect a change and hold people in positions accountable? Like you're asking me about the role of parents. You, in your next IJB evening, could also do a conversation about the crisis that we have with young men right now, because there is a crisis. And I know this is a book about hockey, but it's barely about hockey, right? It's more about relationships. And, I talk to a lot of young men. I talk to, the 58 that are quoted in here, but even since this book came out, I've talked to many more who've reached out and wanted to speak about this. And what I've heard from them is that they have felt worthless, that they have felt hopeless in terms of getting jobs, and we have, of course, as a society, we have taken these supercomputers that are smartphones now, and we've put them into the pockets of every kid who's old enough to walk. And so the kids have an unending supply of gaming and gambling and pornography, and not just pornography, regular pornography, violent pornography. And so now let's take boys and take them out of their homes, where the people who love them and would hold them accountable the most are close to them, and move them far away from their family homes. I wonder how that will work out in many cases. One of the players I talked to, and to be fair, there are many players who come out of junior hockey as upstanding, good men,
Sure.
Right? But there are still a number, and I know this because I interviewed so many of them, who have troubles, who have problems. One of the young players I talked to shared with me that on his going to camp for a junior team, and this is, again, contemporary, this is not old news, he walked into the hotel where the team was staying, and there was a number of other first-year players sitting in a semicircle on chairs, masturbating while they watched pornography. He was 16 years old, and that was his introduction to life in major junior hockey.
I take your point that the incidents and events that happen in this book around hazing and sexual assault and abuse, that happens obviously with young men who have never put on a pair of skates. There's no question about that. But I think what the book persuasively argues is that there is something different here, because the structure has ultimately allowed it to happen in a different way, and in fact facilitated it in a different way.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and because we use the word accountability a lot as journalists. There is no accountability, right? If we hear about an incident, and there are many of them documented in here, and it gets in the public conversation, the leagues, the Western Hockey League, the Ontario Hockey League, the Quebec Maritime Junior Hockey League will say, we take this very seriously, we are investigating this.
Yeah, right.
And then you know what happens?
Nothing.
We don't hear anything.
Yeah.
Trust us.
Yeah.
Well, trust is earned, right? And all these different cases that these leagues have investigated, there was a player in 2018-ish named Eric Guest, who was a rookie with the Kitchener Rangers, who went on social media and said that his older teammates had forced him at a rookie party to use cocaine. And he talked about having, other bad experiences in junior. The league said immediately, we're going to investigate. And it was the last we heard about it. What happened? We don't know.
We'll be right back.
Okay, I want to talk about journalism and its responsibility on this issue, because I thought this was really, really interesting. And to some extent, we have to accept our own role in all of this. It's a theme that runs through the book, but you make the point that the way we cover hockey, which is not just a sport but a cultural phenomenon, is largely through daily reporting. There's reporters in every city and town covering whether it be the junior team or the NHL club. And they file stories on a daily basis. You work for TSN, which employs many daily reporters. This newspaper, every newspaper has daily reporters who are covering this. And so how is it possible that nobody has written about this in such a comprehensive way prior to 2025? And you write this: I understand the struggles that reporters face trying to churn out stories on deadline at a time when media companies are chasing social media views and clicks and likes while not providing enough time for journalists to do the necessary research and deep dives into important stories. As a beat reporter, grinding it out and sometimes filing multiple stories every day during a team's long season, you need access to the players and teams, and you can risk losing that access by asking tough questions. And I agree with that. But how do we square it? So you work for TSN, which has lots of reporters and hockey insiders who are talking about the game. And they absolutely, to do their job, they need access. They need to be able to pick up the phone and get the GM at the New Jersey Devils in the next 5 minutes to talk about the trade. So you come along and you kind of broke the model by doing this kind of work. But what's so fascinating to me, and this is a tip of the hat credit to your employer, they allowed you to do this. This is their bread and butter. This is the golden goose. They make ad revenues on hockey. They have a whole infrastructure that's based upon celebrating the game every day, day in, day out. And you show up and start telling these stories. Why did they let you do this?
Thank you for coming. Listen, the only thing that people, I report to an executive at TSN named Ken Volden. And the only thing that Ken Volden has ever said to me, like, God bless him, for letting us go down this road, and so many stories, not just hockey, but we've done stories on ringette, a full documentary on gymnastics that I talked about, volleyball, basketball, athletics, soccer, you name it. And the only thing he has ever said is make sure that you're fair and make sure that you're right, and go and find the truth, right? In some modest way, let's make our country a little bit of a better place. So I've been just fortunate to work for somebody that has that sort of a vision. And I would never judge other reporters for not doing this, honestly, because, again, we talked about who has the experience to do this kind of work, not everyone. Who has the backing from their employer, like in terms of legal exposure, not everyone. And there are reporters who are on the grind and have to churn out stories every day, right? I'm just, and you're in the same position, through years of hard work. Now we're in a position where we've got the privilege to chase the stories that we think are in the public interest, stories that take longer.
Yeah. To put an even finer point on it, though, and this is all in celebration of TSN. This is a story about incidents that occurred at the World Juniors. The World Juniors is TSN's holiday extravaganza. Like, that is a big deal for TSN. So the very event, it's not just that you wrote about hockey. You wrote about what happened at a specific tournament, which is the holiday highlight for TSN. They clear the decks. It's a very well-watched presumably very lucrative property for them. And if I'm the bosses there, honestly, it's flabbergasting to me that nobody there said, you know what, Rick, I get it. Not this one, though. Not this one. Find anything else, but not this one.
I feel like you saying thank God for TSN is more powerful than me saying thank God for
It
TSN.
is. I'm not sure there's many media organizations that would have allowed you to do this. It feels existential. It really does. So, hats off. What about your colleagues, though?
I mean, listen, TSN's got a lot of great people, and we're all busy and we're all chasing different things. And people who follow sports and follow sports passionately, they want news that is, what are the Maple Leafs going to do? Their season's in the tank, they're in last place, who are they going to trade? And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, that's part of what makes sports great. And we should also aspire to be the best at telling those stories, because for how many people is sport a chance to escape from life for a little bit, right? And so I think that we can be proud of the fact that we do both of those things. We're excellent at telling stories like this, but we also are excellent at doing kind of the meat and potatoes, that's hockey broadcast every night for people who follow the game so closely.
I get it, but you're not answering the question. There are people at your network, and forget your network, but across the spectrum who rely on access. And when TSN is doing stories like that, presumably many of those daily reporters who require access and have been up until now seen as part of the organism of hockey, very much intertwined within it, somebody has to have said to you, Jesus, Rick, you're making life difficult for me. This could undermine my ability to do my job. If I call up and say, I'm Joe Smith from TSN and I'd like to talk to the GM, the odds now that GM is going to say, TSN, screw you.
I can tell you, sitting here, that the opposite is true.
Really?
Yeah. Bob McKenzie is a seasoned hockey insider, the best who's ever done that job. And I don't know details, but I have been told that he has basically told people, back off, we're doing this reporting because it's the right thing to do.
And he hasn't paid any price.
This is a good news story. Like, there has been no one, honestly, who's been like, oh, we're going to get you. Like, maybe at the NHL, but...
That's amazing. That's counterintuitive to me, but that's great. Okay, let's talk about the trial. Most fascinating trial. Twists and turns. It's a movie. It's a Netflix show. The twists and turns, and the lawyer running into the juror at the London market and it blows up it was an incredible thing. Just what are your, when you reflect back on it, what do you?
I mean, the lawyers, I'm not a lawyer. I don't have that training. I just, reported on that case every day for 2 months. And it was extraordinary. It was like nothing people in the legal community have ever seen before. There was 2 mistrials.
It's incredible.
2, right?
It's incredible.
The first one when, there was an interaction between a defense lawyer and a juror at a market, the Covent Garden Market in London. And then the second mistrial, after one of the jurors handed a note up to the judge saying that she and other jurors felt like when they walked into the courtroom, their appearances were being judged by some of the defense lawyers. And you could almost see, and this came after EM had testified and after she had been cross-examined, and you could almost see the defense being like, this is an opportunity, and before you know it, the second jury had been dismissed, and the case moved on as a trial by judge alone. And I think, I remember talking to other reporters. There was a number of great reporters who covered this. Robin Doolittle at the Globe and Mail and Katie Strang at The Athletic. And Kate Dubinsky, who ran a daily blog for CBC, and she did amazing work. You could see reporters actually following Kate's blog as they were sitting in the same courtroom she was, right? Yeah. And as gross as that trial was, it was still a positive experience to cover because there was great collegiality from the media. It was being at the center of a story that mattered, that Canadians across the country were paying attention to. And I would say that the feeling among journalists from almost the first day of the trial was this is going to be an acquittal.
Really? You all thought that?
Yeah. I remember, well, just because of how problematic EM's first statement to the police had been 3 days after that incident in 2018. We came to learn that before charges were laid, that the Crown Attorney had met with EM in London and said, just so you know, this is going to be a long shot, right? You know, there's issues here. We believe what you're saying, but there's issues with your testimony. And, you know, for people here, for people listening to this later, I've asked Crown attorneys and experts in sexual violence about this case particularly, and what their advice would be moving forward to someone. And I think it's good advice. One of the Crowns I talked to said, you know, if you're sexually assaulted and you're capable, do go to the hospital and have a sexual assault evidence kit collected. And then your second stop should not be the police. Your second stop should be a lawyer. Get independent counsel before you go to the police. You don't have to go to the police the day or 3 days after or 3 weeks after a sexual assault. In the Canadian Criminal Code, there is no statute of limitations for sexual assault. And so, you know, the advice from experts is talk to a lawyer and take your time before you go in and make a statement.
And the reason for that is if the first statement is not accurate, it could undermine ultimately the entire case.
In this case, and in other cases like it, like EM testified that she felt like she was to blame. And in many cases, again, I'm not an expert, according to the experts I've talked to, that's a common perspective. Why was I wearing what I was wearing? Why was I putting myself in a situation in a room? Yeah. Why was I drinking so much, right? EM had alleged she had, that evening, had 12 alcoholic drinks, and the defense contended that, in fact, some of the shots that she had were only half shots, so she only had 8 drinks instead of 12. Nevertheless, drunk. And there would be feelings of, well, why did I drink as much as I did as well? She testified about that.
You had some moments as well. I didn't know some of this stuff. So you're out in the hallway in the courthouse, and a guy confronts you and says, this is all his fault. You're ruining these boys' lives. And then he shows up with a T-shirt with your face on it that says, Rick Westhead is a piece of shit. You're going to get what's coming to you. What's that like?
I mean, I believe in freedom of expression. There was a moment there was a moment that I thought about asking if he wanted me to sign his shirt. Yeah.
So your face, he did a lot of work for this.
He went to extreme, it was extraordinary. This was outside the courthouse. I mean, it takes you in an instant, and all of a sudden, like, your brain switches. Right, and you're looking at the hands, like, is there a weapon in his hands? Does it look like he has something in his pocket? He was a big guy, he was about 6'4", and how much space do I have between him and I? But at the end of the day, I tried to de-escalate it. I asked him why he was so upset. I told him that journalists have a job to do, and it's to report on these stories that are in the public interest. And he ultimately ran away into his car, took off, and the police got his license plate and visited him later that day and served him with a criminal trespass notice, telling him that he'd be charged if he came back to court. It's not the only, there are angry people, right? And social media has made that worse and accelerated that. Some of the messages that I've received are very angry. People, I was mentioning, and you know the story well, of, Carter, my son, going through a cancer battle. And more than one person on Twitter will send me a message saying, I hope your son gets cancer again, things like this. And so what can you do? That also is part of the bargain. With social media, we have technology where people can anonymously send messages and say things, whatever they want, no matter how hateful. And, the choice, I guess, that I make is backing away from social media for the most part. I'm not on there very much anymore. And, yeah.
One of the things that is really helpful for journalists in a trial is the exhibits. They offer remarkable insight into the behind the scenes. And through the process of the trial, of course, you gained access, and the public gained access to some of the details behind the case. I just wanted to read these emails. Emails are always very helpful, contextual documents. So these are a series of text messages between one of the 5 NHL players, Michael McLeod, and EM. So these would have happened a day or two after the incident. So he writes to her, "Did you go to the police after Sunday?" McLeod wrote at 11:26 a.m. "I talked to my mom about it and she called, I think, but I told her not to," the woman wrote. "I don't want anything bad to come of it, so I told her to stop." "You said you were having fun?" McLeod wrote. "I was really drunk and didn't feel good about it at all after," she responded. "But I'm not trying to get anyone in trouble. I know I was in the wrong too." At 12:04, the woman wrote, "I was okay with going home with you. It was everyone else afterwards that I wasn't expecting. I just felt like I was being made fun of and taken advantage of." And then he responds a minute later, "I understand that you're embarrassed about what happened, but you need to talk to your mother right now and straighten things out with the police before this goes too far. This is a serious matter that she is misrepresenting and could have significant implications for a lot of people, including you. What can you do to make this go away?" There's lots of this material. When you're reading through this, and this was all presented in court, obviously, was that material helpful to the Crown's case or ultimately undermined it?
I'm not sure. I mean, there was a lot of material. Like that passage was, the Crown believed that was going to help their case because they argued that when EM wrote this text message to Michael McLeod saying, "Hey, I was okay going home with you. It was everything else afterwards, all these other men. That was a problem." And the Crown believed that, hey, well, if it was true that EM had said to Michael McLeod, "Why don't you invite all your teammates back here? Invite the whole team back to the hotel room. I'd like to have sex with everyone." If that was true, then McLeod surely would have responded to her text message saying, "What are you talking about? You wanted this to happen. You asked me to get everybody to come back to the room." So there was all kinds of messages like that. Some of them, some of the messages were just interesting because they told another story. After EM goes to the hotel room with Michael McLeod and they have consensual sex, he sends a group text message out saying, "Who's up for a 3-way? Room 209, quick, Mikey." And one of the responses to that invitation for group sex was a player saying, "Who's got my charger?" And the story that tells, in my opinion, is just how banal this was. This was, for some of these guys, just another Monday night. Hey, which of you 20 guys wants to come back and have sex with a girl right now? And the answer is, "Who's got my cell phone charger?" That tells me that for some of these players, that wasn't extraordinary at all. I have another example.
Go.
I think the turning point in this whole trial was the testimony of a player who was not charged. The star witness in this case was supposed to be Brett Howden. Brett Howden was not accused of criminal wrongdoing. He plays for the Vegas Golden Knights, and he was in the hotel room when all this happened. And roughly a week after this incident, Brett Howden texted a teammate named Taylor Radish, who also was not accused of criminal wrongdoing and also was there. And Brett Howden wrote in his text message, I'm so glad I left the room when I did. Duber, it was a reference to Dylan Dubé, who was the captain of that World Junior team. Duber was slapping that girl's ass so hard, it looked like it hurt. And he was happy he left when he did. And then several days after sending that text message, Brett Howden was interviewed by the law firm that Hockey Canada had hired to do an investigation. And in his interview with Hockey Canada's lawyer, Brett Howden said that he had heard EM weeping in that hotel room, which is, to me, a very specific word. And when he was on the stand testifying, Brett Howden could not remember any of this. Brett Howden remembered that EM was consenting, but all of these other specifics, he couldn't remember. He couldn't remember the weeping. He couldn't remember anything about the text message with Taylor Radish. And the defense used that to its advantage, right? He was a Crown witness. And the defense argued, like, you shouldn't, to the judge, you shouldn't even allow that text message between Howden and Radish to be entered as evidence. It's not a formal statement. And the judge agreed. And I found that interesting. Again, I'm not an expert on this, but my understanding is that text messages between regular people are introduced as evidence every day in cases. So I don't understand, even now, why that was not admitted. And I will always wonder how this case would have wound up if a jury had been the ones making the decision.
Would it have been different?
Well, we won't know if we don't know.
What's your gut?
I don't have a gut. I would love. It's interesting. In the United States, jurors after trials do interviews all the time.
Yeah.
But in Canada, jurors cannot do that. It's a criminal offense for a juror to speak about a case where they have reached a judgment, right, and either convicted or acquitted someone. However, in this case, because there was mistrials, the jurors actually never had to deliberate on a verdict. So the jurors, both of the juries in this case, they would be free to do media interviews if they choose to.
Fascinating. So why haven't they? Have you called them?
Well, I don't know who they are. I mean, their identities are protected. It would need to be a case where the jurors would need to come to reporters or be introduced.
And none have?
No, not yet. Not that I know of. I mean, it's possible. Maybe a reporter is out there right now working on that story.
Fascinating. So you don't know their names, but you sat there, you know what they look like. You know they live in London.
Yeah, well, you know what they look like because when you see them come into the court, you're writing down what their hairstyle is and their hair color and their gender and what they do for a living and, details like that. There was a few, for instance, who were farmers who in jury selection said, like, I can't be here right now because it's the spring and we've got a plant, right? Yeah. And so you've got these little biographies, like 4 lines to go off of. And no one is mentioning their names when they come in. It's like juror number 37, juror number 52. So, really, it's a tough thing. And you don't have a picture of them because there's no cameras allowed in Canadian courts. So.
Man, I want to read that story, though, man. I want to read what the jurors want.
I think ultimately, we hear stories every day, and I think the National Post does a good job of this, of stories detailing what's happening in our justice system, right? And asking questions about what happens when people are convicted of serious violent crimes and how often they get bail, and what happens if they reoffend, and who actually is going to prison and for how long. But in this case, I don't know that these players going to prison is the point, or even being convicted, because ultimately, these 5 men have faced consequences. They, for years now, have had their names and their pictures on the internet every day, on social media every day. They've lost their livelihoods, at least for a period of time. Carter Hart is back in the NHL now, but he is the only one of those 5 who is back playing in the NHL. They have had to explain to their families their roles in this. And one day, if these men are married or not married and have children, they're going to have to explain to their kids what happened, because their kids are going to be asked about this at school. So there have been consequences.
So was there justice here?
I know that's not a question for me, honestly. I don't know if there was justice or not, but this has been a case that has led to some positive outcomes. One, it's led to really great reporting by the Globe and Mail exposing a slush fund that Hockey Canada maintained. It has led to accountability for sports organizations across our country, because other sport organizations do not want to be in the same situation Hockey Canada has found itself. And I can tell you the most, in terms of demographics, the number one demographic of people in Canada who've reached out to me about this are moms. And that surprised me. And the number of mothers who have told me that they have read this book and that it has been a catalyst for them to talk to their kids about these issues, it's been shocking. I almost, and I would almost say it offers a challenge to men. Now, I did a talk some weeks ago at the University of Ottawa, and at this talk there was about 40 to 50 men in their 20s, students there. And I asked them, how many of you have had conversations about consent with your families, with your moms and your dads? And of those 40 or 50 men, 3 had those conversations. These are uncomfortable conversations. No one likes having them. When I dropped off Carter at University of Guelph for school this year, I said, well, let's talk about consent. And he kind of rolled his eyes and said, listen, I've heard you talk about sexual assault in our house every day for 3 years now. But nevertheless, I just said to him, my expectation of you, Carter, is that you will be a protector of young women. And if you see a woman at a party or on campus in residence, and it looks like she is not comfortable in the situation she's in, that you will say to her, are you okay? And you won't leave until she looks at you and says yes. This is not a huge ask, right? And I think that my challenge to fathers is have these conversations with your sons. And if this book leads to that, then it's been a success.
What's the moral at the end of the day? What is the moral of this story for you? What needs to be done? Let me hand you the magic wand to fix it. What would you do?
Here's the good news is there is hope, right? Again, there are great people in hockey. Give me 2 minutes. Give me 30 seconds to tell you a quick story. When Carter was sick and had come home after his second round of chemo, and his hair was coming out, and his beautiful eyelashes were falling out, and in our home it was dark. I knock on the door, and I go to the door, and there's a boy there named Keaton Wells. And Keaton has got a booster juice in his hand and a burger. And he says, hey, I was thinking of Carter, and I wanted to make sure he had this food for lunch. And I said, Keaton, I'm sorry. Carter's doing a Zoom with a teacher at Sick Kids. He can't talk to you right now, and you can't come in because of COVID and how immunocompromised Carter was. And Keaton said, yeah, no problem. I'll wait here. I'll wait on the porch. First week of February, weather just like it is outside, minus 20, 25. That boy stood on our doorstep for 45 minutes. And when Carter answered the door, gave him a quick hug, handed him the milk, handed him the booster juice, handed him the burger, said, I'm really sorry, this is probably cold now. But what a friend. And he had that friend through hockey. Keaton was a hockey teammate. So I not only recognize that there are great people in hockey, I celebrate them. I celebrate Keaton Wells, and I love telling the story about his friendship to Carter. And there's other good news. There are programs now, like one in Hamilton, Ontario, where the Hamilton Minor Hockey Association has partnered with an agency called Coaching Boys into Men. And so this program partners with, in Hamilton, a women's shelter named Interval House, run by a woman named Sue Taylor. And so this year, 16 hockey teams in Hamilton are doing this program, Coaching Boys into Men. And so what that means is their coaches, hockey coaches, are trained by the staff at Interval House in how to talk to boys about issues like consent. And so through the course of this hockey season, these 16 teams are having a series of conversations after practices. And last year, I went down and I watched some of these sessions. And I thought what I would see would be men of our age or a bit younger talking to boys who are 10, 12, 14, who are looking at their feet, who were uncomfortable, didn't want to have this conversation at all. And I could not have been more wrong. These boys were desperate to have this conversation. They were leading the conversations. They were talking. One boy asked about what the room thought they should do, group of 12-year-olds, if a girl sent them a photo of herself with no clothes on. Should you post that on the Snapchat for the team? The 12-year-olds are leading this conversation. Another coach last year told me that his team led a conversation about what they should do. These are 14-year-olds if they see a young girl being roofied or drugged at a house party. What do you do in that situation? The boys were leading the conversation. They want to have these discussions, but because it's hard and because men are so often career-driven, and I am guilty of this as the next guy, I wish I had more of these conversations with my sons when they were younger. They're not happening. So maybe the redemption story for hockey is that coming out of all of this, maybe there's a movement across Canada where these sorts of programs become the norm and where we really are helping these boys become the best versions of themselves and leaders and protectors, not just of women, but of the vulnerable, right? Of people who are racialized, of people who are LGBTQ+, of people who are vulnerable. What an amazing story that would be.
Has Carter read the book?
No, Carter's in first year, and he needs to be focused on the school right now. There'll be a time for the book. Can I read you my favorite quote?
Yeah, do it.
So the Coaching Boys to Men, you think about how hard it is in a country of 40 million people to affect a change. And I asked Jeff about this. And
Sorry, who's Jeff?
Jeff Toole is one of the men in Hamilton who is an advocate for the Coaching Boys into Men program. And so I write, for Jeff Toole, the path ahead is unmistakable. Broaden the reach of the Coaching Boys into Men program and enlist more coaches in the effort. We know what works, he said with calm certainty. The challenge now is helping others recognize its worth. As people learn about this program, I think parents are going to want their kids playing in an organization that buys into it. Toole understood that reshaping hockey's culture won't come quickly. It can feel like we are just taking spoonfuls of water out of the ocean. This is hard, and there are going to be setbacks. It takes courage. But if we stick to it, this will change minds and our culture. Every spoonful is a kid. Every spoonful matters. We have to do this for the game, but more importantly, we have to do this for our kids to help them be the best sons, brothers, husbands, and men that they can be.
That's a good quote.
10-3 is produced by Sean Knox. Theme music by Bryce Hall. I'm Dave Breckenridge. Thanks for listening. We'll be right back.